The Cold War has largely been portrayed as a series of Soviet American dynamics. However, it is wrong to restrict it as such. Regions outside the member states of the Soviet Union and the United States played crucial roles in the Cold War and became ideological battlegrounds for each side. Africa, in particular, was a very important strategic asset, as many African countries had recently gained independence, leaving a political and economic vacuum within many places in the continent. The United States and the USSR both desired to fill this within the Congo, leading to much conflict and disagreement within the country. There are many countries within Africa, so what propelled the US and USSR to turn their attention to the Congo? The Congo was rich in mineral deposits that were essential to military development. It shared southern borders with other European countries such as Angola and northern Rhodesia, and had a vast railway system that linked minefields with ports. The continued exploitation of the Congo was considered vital for the Western cause, as the US emphasized a need to protect their capitalistic interests. The Congolese nationalists, who were considered a threat to Western interests, were supported by the Communist bloc through the Belgian Communist Party. Patrice Lumumba, a leading figure in the Congolese nationalist movement and Prime Minister of the Congo, did nothing to soften the threat of the country to Western interests. Lumumba was a very influential part of the anti-colonial struggle in the Congo, advocating for complete independence from Belgian economic and political policies. This naturally aligned the Congo more with the USSR in terms of policy and overall interests. In April of 1959, he secretly contacted the Soviet ambassador in Brussels, who came to the conclusion that the Congo was the most favorable country in Africa for Marxism and communism to spread. To the US, Lumumba was a dangerous, extreme left-wing politician who was a greater hazard to Western interests than Fidel Castro in Cuba. And when Congo claimed independence, the US only got more frightened.
Nous allons commencer une nouvelle lutte, une lutte sublime qui va mener notre pays à la paix, à la prospérité et à la grandeur. Nous allons établir ensemble la justice sociale et assurer que chacun reçoive la juste rémunération de son travail.
Almost immediately after the Congo gained independence on July 1960, the country fell into disarray. Congolese nationalists in the Armée Nationale Congolaise, otherwise known as the ANC, munied against Belgian officers in Leopoldville. Belgium used the chaos and mutiny as leverage and propaganda, saying Lumumba had bribed Soviet soldiers to try and undermine the independence of the country. Regions throughout the country began to break away from the central government and form their own. South Kasai detached, while the mineral-rich province of Katanga ceded on July 11th. Katanga was assisted by Belgian troops who landed in the Congo a day before, with Moise Tshombe becoming the puppet ruler of the region. Lumumba appealed to the UN on July 12th for assistance to stop the mutinies, take the Belgian troops out of the Congo, and throw out the separatists. The UN sent a, quote, peacekeeping force to keep order until local security forces were able to do the job by themselves. The UN Security Council demanded the withdrawal of Belgian forces, but did not specifically condemn Belgium for their aggression. When the Belgian troops merely backed into Katanga, the US was not ready to invade or take any action. As Lumumba got virtually no support from the UN, he turned again to the USSR. The Soviet Union was able to provide food and medical assistance, but not much else, as it was not equipped to militarily intervene in Africa. By the end of July, it was obvious that UN forces were going to oppose and defy the government in Congo. They disarmed Congolese troops, but let Belgian troops go unchanged and untouched. The UN operation was favoring Western interests, like the US, and when Lumumba aligned himself with the USSR, it did not help his case in pleading for the removal of Belgian troops. Lumumba became completely reliant on the Soviet Union as he became increasingly aggravated by the US and UN, and declared he was assuming complete power to resolve the conflict. The USSR demanded that Belgian troops be removed and that Katanga rejoin the Congo, to which the UN replied that it is an internal matter and cannot be moved upon by the UN. However, the UN Secretary-General communicated directly with Katanga and replaced Belgian troops with UN substitutes.
The United States, aware of the cooperation between the USSR and Lumumba, considered the possibility of military intervention and tried to assassinate Lumumba, but failed. Instead, the US and Belgium gave support to General Joseph Mobutu of the Congolese army, who seized power in the country and ended relations with the USSR. Combined with the overthrow of Lumumba and pressure from the United States, Soviet and Chinese blocs and embassies left the country. Although Patrice Lumumba was placed under house arrest, Deputy Prime Minister Antoine Gazinga was able to establish an opposition party to Mobutu. Ultimately, by 1960, 4 different regimes had established themselves in the country. They included Joseph Mobutu, backed by US and allied countries, in the Kinshasa region of the Congo. The regime of Antoine Gazinga in Stanleyville was largely supported by the Soviet bloc, as well as many other newly independent African nations. A smaller coalition was established in the South Kasai region by Albert Kalonji, until 1961 when he was removed. Lastly, a Belgian and Union Miniere-supported Chombe established a regime in Katanga.
The expulsion of Soviet embassies and journalists, paired with Lumumba's downfall, was seen as a victory for the West on all fronts. The US understood that a complete Western success would only be possible if Lumumba was taken out once and for all, which was the rationale behind his execution. In December of 1960, Lumumba was handed over to his enemies in Katanga and viciously murdered. The manner in which Lumumba was dealt with shows how the UN peacekeeping force, originally implemented to discourage violence between the Congolese and the Belgian troops, was a tool of Western design. The USSR recognized this and demanded the replacement of UN Secretary-General Hammarskjöld. By 1964, the Congo was again under the threat of collapse due to the rebellions led by supporters of Lumumba and the Marxist government. Such leaders were also supported by the African countries that opposed American and Belgian intervention in the Congo. The Congo is just one example of a country used as a continued ideological battleground between the United States and the Soviet Union. Africa as a whole was sought after as a strategic position for both blocs in the Cold War, and each country had its own struggle and respective set of issues. The Congo is also a great example of how this ideological war between the Soviet Union and the United States impacted other countries. By turning to one side of the rivalry between the two superpowers, Lumumba put himself in danger from the other side. Because the Congo was a prized possession for both the USSR and the US, conflict unfolded as each wanted to influence the country more than the other. The Congo crisis portrays how small countries far from the main ideological agents were still affected by the Cold War, and how they can provide a great deal of insight when analyzing the large historical powers and their dynamics between each other.